My name is Pej. I am an interventionist. I'm also a recovery coach, sober from all mood and mind altering substances, as in drugs, alcohol, substances, etc., for 17 plus years. Actually, it's December 1st today, 2024. So in 2 weeks, it will be 17 and a half years. And I thought I would just kind of make this video just to talk a little bit about who I am and what I do, but kind of show you my normal side of life, like when I'm not actually doing interventions, but as a sober man, how I live. So these are my three pooches. Modi's the big one. Modi, that's Loki, and that's Freya. And I love them very much. They're like my kids. I live in both Los Angeles and Orange County for many different reasons. I work in both counties. That's in Southern California. And the reason that I love Southern California a lot is that I have family here, mom, dad, even though they're not together. They live pretty close to each other. I have a girlfriend. She's 6 years sober, actually coming up on 7 pretty soon. She's very active in the recovery community. I also have a large movement of recovery people that are around me, very, very active in sobriety, in recovery, in many different capacities and many different realms. And the reason I say that is that we've got a large 12-step community, but also I own some recovery homes where people live and they live sober lives. People of all different walks of life, different ages, races, creeds, colors, it doesn't matter. We have men, women, non-binary. We've got former fentanyl users, former alcoholics, former meth addicts, former marijuana addicts, former cocaine addicts, polysubstance abusers. Some are certain specific types of substances that they've used, and they're all overcoming their addictions. They are staying on the path of recovery, and so that's part of the movement. Then on top of that, I have a lot of friends that when I got sober, I made these new friends that some came before me, some came after me. Some are mentors, some are spiritual advisors, some are sponsors as in like in the 12-step community and world. And we all come together a lot, sometimes for events, sometimes we congregate in various places, like meetings, 12-step meetings, and we do a lot of stuff, like activities and things like that, sober, 100% sober. So that's kind of who I am. And just wanted to kind of go over that. But then I want to kind of go a little bit deeper and talk about what it's like to be a 53-year-old man who is sober for 17 and a half years and has pretty much made his whole life revolve around his recovery. First and foremost, the reason that, there's a lot of people that I've seen that they come into the path of recovery that say things like, I don't have to like make AA my life, or recovery doesn't have to be your life. And you know what? To each their own. Anybody that comes in the path of recovery can treat it any way they like to. They don't have to, absolutely not. But I do want to say that for me, if I didn't make recovery the most important thing to me, I wouldn't have stayed sober, right? So why? Why did I embrace recovery the way I did? Well, first and foremost, that in order for me to talk about the solution, which was recovery, I had to see what the problem was. The problem was certainly the substances that I put into my body, but the problem was me. And so due to a lot of trauma and a lot of issues that I had encountered when I was younger and just growing up, it was everything from insecurities to inadequacies to trauma, as far as mental, verbal abuse. A lot of that was going on, a lot of bullying, getting shot down by a female that I loved. She was the love of my life, and I know the exact nature of my wrongs, but then I wasn't even well while I was with her, let alone after she left me. I just turned to drugs and alcohol, and it became a very, very normal way of life for me, not just using, but also selling it to be able to use more of it. So my life was just one big problem. By the time I was 35 years old, because I lived a certain lifestyle, and it wasn't just because of dealing drugs, but doing lots and lots of drugs that consumed me, I ended up a homeless man that needed to change his life. And so what I did was I went to a recovery home of a man who I actually met 5 years before that had another recovery home where I didn't stay at his house. I was 30 then when I first met him, and then when I was 35, almost becoming 36 years old, I ended up at his front door of yet another home that he had without knowing that I was going to this guy's house. And the man just showed me a different way of living. He demonstrated what recovery consists of. He taught me about codependency. He was Persian, like myself, and he taught me about our community and how unhealthy we are as a community because of the amount of enabling that happens from our mothers or our fathers, or just a lot of hovering, a lot of helicopter mom stuff. Very relatable, when I would hear it, because I definitely knew how to take advantage of, my mom as far as living at her house for a while after I burned everything else to the ground. So when I went to his house, he just showed me. He said, recovery has to be your number one thing. And then after that, everything will fall into place. So he encouraged me to go to school for drug and alcohol studies. And I did that. And I did really, really well in school. And it's the first time I did well in school because I was sober. By being sober and being a high achiever, I got on the dean's list. I was a 4.0 student, all these things, right? It was really interesting to be able to achieve in that sense because I hadn't been able to do that well for myself ever, like all throughout my adolescence and high school days and everything like that. By going to college and becoming, a drug and alcohol counselor, I started working in the field of addiction. And that was interesting because I was working with adolescents at first, which reminded me a lot of my upbringing and how messed up I was. God started putting these people in my path that were youngsters that also were very troubled kids from all walks of life. And I did that for a while until the Department of Justice decided to take me out of the adolescent equation. They said because I was a former meth seller that they didn't want me to be around teenagers. And I'm like, come on, man, I'm not doing it anymore. It's like that was a thing of my past and that's not who I am anymore. While I fought that case and I had a counselor, like my original rehab counselor, as well as my psychologist and my parents and all these people come and represent me in the court and stick up for me, I started working in adult treatment and with 18 and above. And that was a very interesting time. Finally I got to group facilitate, case manage because I finished school and all these different, while going to work in rehab, I realized I needed to separate my own recovery from the recovery job. I was warned by people in the recovery community about that, not letting that become my program, if you will. And I wanted to take it to the next level. I was working long, hard hours, managing people's cases from detox to residential, all the way through treatment, and even down to discharge eventually after they did their time being in treatment and putting them in sober livings. And so when I would put them in sober livings, I would always pick a good one that was very 12-step based that I believed in. And I watched a lot of those people. This was when I was about 5 or 6 years sober, but I watched a lot of those people actually get their lives back. There's still people to this day that find me from back then and tell me, I may have been a hard client for you back then, but I realized what you were trying to do for us. I see you on social media now, and I really love that you have stayed the course and you continue to keep being, a beacon of hope and somebody that helps people. So again, as life went on, I took on different roles. I became a recovery coach. I did a lot of recovery companion work too, where in LA, I would work on cases with people that were, usually well-to-do. Some of them were high caliber celebrities or, high profile people that I was brought on by certain people. I got these mentors that were teaching me, and they would give me these cases to work with people that were either flight risks or people that couldn't stay sober for the life of them, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was a different realm of recovery for me. I found this other newfound passion of being an interventionist. Straight up going out and finding people or people finding me to try to go out and find people. I became trained in doing interventions and, not just in our Persian community, but just locally and nationally. I started after being fully trained and doing all the courses and everything. I was supervised under the direction of a man by the name of Earl Hightower, who was also a world-renowned interventionist, and he showed me the ins and outs of interventions. And so I got to develop my own style, practice different modalities of intervention, and take on a certain type of personality, which is my own personality, on social media. Pandemic hit. During the pandemic, I wanted to kind of get out there more and be seen more. And I was told that if I wanted to build my brand as far as being an interventionist and a coach, I need to start with TikTok and then YouTube. And so I got in the TikTok space unwillingly. I really didn't want to be on TikTok, but I didn't really know, what it was all about. When I did get on there, I realized that there's a lot of people that are out there suffering and struggling. And so people would find me often. They would be from all walks of life. Again, my favorite type of people, humans with disabilities, as far as disabilities when it comes to addiction, alcoholism, etc. So I found myself answering lots of questions and helping people. I was answering questions. Sometimes people would call me from across America. They would say, my loved one is struggling. My husband, my wife, my son, my adult. This is something I hear quite often, which reminds me a lot of where I came from. my adult addicted son is homeless, walking the streets and aimless. And like, it just always like brings me back to that period of time when I was in my mid 30s, just burning it to the ground, like losing the trust of my mom, getting the help that I need. And now I get to see these other people that are struggling and kind of sharing my experience with them. I do a lot of self-disclosure a lot of times, and people find me from across the United States, and I go to them and I try to help them a lot of times. So that's, who I am, what I do, and what I'm all about.